Mom, your prayers are nothing but a curse on this family. Veronica spat the words with such venom that I felt a physical sting across my face. Behind her, the small crucifix on my living room wall seemed to tremble, though no window was open. My daughter's eyes, those same eyes that once looked up at me with childlike wonder, now burned with something foreign, something dark that didn't belong to her. All these years of your ridiculous faith. Look what it's brought us. Nothing but misery. She grabbed the prayer journal from my hands and hurled it across the room. The thud echoed through the house like a warning. I remained seated, my hands now empty but steady. The smell of the strange incense she'd started burning in her room weeks ago clung to her clothes. And though tears threatened, I refused to let them fall. This wasn't just teenage rebellion or midlife anger. Something had attached itself to my daughter's spirit, and I could feel it watching me through her eyes, challenging me, expecting me to break. But I wouldn't break. Not even when I noticed the strange symbol tattooed freshly on her wrist, partially hidden beneath her bracelet. The symbol I'd seen in my dreams 3 nights in a row, a warning that the battle for my daughter's soul had already begun. My name is Teresa Navarro. For 63 years I have walked with a steady hand in God's, and I say that not to boast but to name the thing that has held me when the ground shook. My mornings begin before the house wakes. A cup of coffee, the Bible open on my knee, a small ribbon marking the psalm that feels like an answer that day. There is a rhythm to my house. The kettle sings. The lemon tree in the backyard exhales a bright scent at dawn. Neighbors stop by and bring news or a small loaf of bread. We have lived in a loop of simple kindness. My kitchen table has seen births and funerals. It has heard apologies and laughter. It has been a place where prayer happens quietly, where hands meet over small disasters and larger mercies. I am not a woman who seeks attention in the pew. My prayer is a conversation, soft, stubborn, faithful. I have sat on porches and whispered for healing when doctors had no more answers. I have kept vigil beside hospital beds and by the beds of friends who prayed their last breath. Prayer is not a habit for me. It is the thread that stitches the days together. Lately the thread felt as if it were being pulled apart. The first sign was small. Sunday dinner began to arrive late. Plates were cleared with apologies, and then a phone at the edge of the table would glow. Veronica began to fold into herself. She would laugh, then check a message, then go silent, and when I reached for her hand she would pull away as if my touch burned. There were other small things that should have read like a warning. A book slipped between cushions that spoke of cleansing generational energy. A stray bundle of charcoal found in the shed. Friends named in passing, advisors, coaches, never invited to the table. Little shifts that, at the time, I tried to explain away. Midlife doubts. A hunger for new language. A desire to reinvent. But prayer does not blind me to patterns. I began to see the outline of a story, someone approaching my child with a promise, someone who called my prayers old-fashioned and dangerous. I felt a constriction in my chest, as if someone had reached into the room and switched the air to a colder setting. The house seemed to carry a weight. The sunlight through the kitchen window felt a touch dimmer on some afternoons. I would wake in the night with a word or an image. A symbol I had seen in a dream 3 mornings in a row. A small black stone. A doll stitched of dark cloth. My fingers would go to the cross on the wall as if to lean against it. And I would pray, sometimes with a trembling I could not hide. I prayed for discernment. I prayed for protection. I prayed that truth would come like water to the surface. I have lived long enough to know that faith is not an escape from the world but a way through it. I have also learned that battles do not always announce themselves with thunder. Sometimes they come as whispers that gather speed. So I cleaned the house slowly, not to prove anything to anyone, but to clear a place where light might find room. I moved a chair so the living room felt open. I hung family photos in plain sight. I placed my worn journal on the table where she had thrown hers before. I started to pray with a precision I had not needed in years. Not frantic words, but lines of scripture that pressed against a lie. No weapon formed against you shall prosper. I declared it aloud, then softer, then again in silence. I asked Father Dominic to pray with me. He smelled of old paper and incense and spoke with a voice that steadied my heart. He brought blessed oil in a small vial, and when he anointed my doorway I felt an odd peace settle like dust. I also did the practical things. I called Dr. Elena Marquez, who works with people who leave controlling relationships. She listened without judgment. She agreed to be available if Veronica wanted to talk. I learned who else in the neighborhood had met this same woman, Luciana or Claudia, as we later discovered she was called. Names that shifted like sand. People who reappeared in other stories of isolation and extraction. I prepared a meal, a small gesture that felt like an offering. Chilaquiles, the way Veronica likes them. I arranged family photographs across the table: weddings, birthdays, a sun-drenched beach day when the sea seemed to clap at our feet. I anointed the threshold of my home with the blessed oil, not like a talisman but as a proclamation: this place belongs to mercy. Before the doorbell rang that evening I prayed with a steadiness that surprised me. I prayed for courage and for tact. I prayed for my daughter's eyes to be open to truth without feeling shamed. I prayed for the one who had come between us to be exposed without spectacle. I prayed that the love in the room would be stronger than fear. May I be honest here for a moment? This channel is new for me, and my hands shake at the thought of telling strangers such private things. If this story finds you, and you have a quiet place to give, please consider subscribing. Our little family of faith is starting, and each new person brings light. Tell me where you watch from. I would like to know the city or the country of the one who listens. Your presence matters more than you know. The bell sounded at exactly 6 p.m. I opened the door and for a moment I held my breath. Veronica stood there, clutching a small black pendant to her throat like it was a life preserver. Her face had lost its color. She kept her distance, as if approaching were a dangerous thing. Raphael and the children shuffled in behind her, their shoes scuffing the mat. We moved through the dinner with deliberate normalcy. The children chattered about school. Raphael told a small story about a job inconvenience that was annoying but manageable. I watched Veronica's hands as they trembled while reaching for a tortilla. I watched the pendant, its dull sheen catching the light, and I felt the presence in the room subtle, like a chill on the back of the neck. Say this with me: I did not come to accuse. I came to invite. That was the posture I chose. I would hold the ground of welcome and truth. I would not shout. I would not shame. I would show her the pictures of her life held in the hands of people who loved her. After dessert, when the children were settled with a movie, I placed a folder on the table. Inside were messages, screenshots, names, a list of charges. There was also the small wooden box Miguel had found and the silver key he'd handed me. I did not want to embarrass her. I wanted her to see the pattern. When I said the name Luciana, there was a flicker and almost imperceptible flinch. She called her a teacher. I said, plainly, her real name is Claudia Montez, and she has been accused of taking advantage of people who are in the middle of big life changes. I spread the documents like a gentle blow. For a moment she accused us of spying. She said we wanted to keep her small, that we were jealous. I felt the old maternal sting, the one that has met every new lover or new idea with a protective, foolish jealousy. But this was different. This wound cut deeper, into spirit. I reached for her hand and those ordinary sounds became a backdrop to a tension that grew like a shadow under the door. Miguel noticed more than I gave him credit for. He would linger by the hallway and stare at the guest room door. One afternoon he tugged my sleeve and whispered about the small silver key he had found. He handed it to me with the solemnity of someone passing a secret. I felt a coldness as my fingers closed around that metal. It was ordinary and it was not. There is something about a child's honesty that strips away pretense. He said, "Abuela, she has a box." He did not yet understand the power of the contents. I did. My heart tightened like a fist. I told him to play, and he ran, leaving his small questions in the air. I opened the box with hands that would not tremble. The smell that rose was faintly metallic and sour, like tin left in a rain puddle. Inside lay the cloth doll with my hair woven into its crown. My name and my face had been crossed out in some photos. A list of cleansings folded into careful handwriting. A small black stone, warm as if it had been in a pocket. The room seemed to tilt slightly, as if a current had shifted beneath the floorboards. I set the box on the table and called Raphael. He came with the look of a man who had been trying to keep everything afloat and had just found a larger leak. He read through the list, the charges, the messages. His jaw worked. I felt the household breathe around us, children still laughing in the living room, the television's low hum sounding like a distant sea. This was the first time I let myself name it, exploitation. Someone had used spiritual language to isolate and to take. Someone had convinced my daughter that my prayers were a chain and that their rituals were freedom. The thought made my stomach dangerous with hurt. The betrayal was not only spiritual. It was intimate, and it felt like a wound in the tender places. Neighbors began to circle with small confessions. A woman from church told me she had lost a cousin to the same pattern. A neighbor left a message about a friend who had been asked for $500 for an emergency cleansing. The names blurred. The pattern did not. Fraud. Isolation. Fear dressed as guidance. Still, the person at the center of it was Veronica. I could not conflate her with the force that had gripped her. That separation of person and presence grew into a discipline for me. When I looked at her, I saw my child first tenacity, charm, fear. Then, with a slower and harder gaze, I saw the place the persuasion had taken root. There were small human tensions that mirrored the spiritual divide. A subtle rivalry had been sown between me and the woman who called herself a coach. Veronica would come to family gatherings with a new posture, a soft disdain for the old ways. A cousin commented on my old-fashioned prayers as if to be polite, and the comment landed like a pebble that rippled. Raphael, who had always been practical, began to keep his worry to himself and to work late. One evening he snapped at a minor thing and then apologized with the embarrassment of a man who knows he has been cracked by worry. This is the first micro-conflict, the household's patience with change versus the safety of the past. It was not simple stubbornness on my part. It was a fear I could name, the fear that something tender could be taken by a smoother voice that promised power without cost. The second micro-conflict was more private, Veronica's shame at having been deceived. She would dart a look at me and then look away, as if admitting the mistake would undo her. At night the house kept me awake. I would step into the hallway and listen for the small things. Veronica talking on the phone in another room with a voice that changed and then changed back. Footsteps that did not sound like her gait. A candle left burning in the guest room that I had not put there. The world rearranged itself around a small list of rituals. I began to watch details with the hunger of someone who reads a map before a storm. The pendant she wore seemed to pulse with an oil-dark shine that caught the light in an odd, oily way. Its cord had frayed at one side as if it had been tugged many times. I noticed receipts in her purse for sums that made me choke. $500 for an urgent clearing. Another charge the next week. Over $7,000 in 3 months. The math of it hit me like cold water. When I asked, she said the payments were to herself self-investment, expansion. When I pressed, she grew defensive. The good nurse in me began to worry about the practical, the children, the mortgage, the steady erosion of security by a steady siphon of small trusts. The mother in me began to grieve. There were other characters in this quiet play. Father Dominic would pause before speaking and then say a single line that altered the air. "Evil loves disguise," he said once, and then turned a page in his prayer book. Dr. Marquez left short messages with tips on how to speak without shaming. Raphael's mother sent a casserole and a note that said, simply, "Call if you need me." Small cords tying us to ordinary life. I started to place small anchors in the house. A rosary in a drawer I kept, not to wave as a banner but to remind me where gospel words meet our hands. Photos on the mantel. A cup of warm milk left by the side of Veronica's bed one night when she could not sleep. These were small acts of faith and of care, ways to insist on presence. The tension had an effect on the children. Miguel became quieter, as though he were trying to weigh words to make them safe. Sarah, younger, would ask blunt questions. "Why does Mom look sad, Abuela?" she would say. My answers were simple and true. I told them that sometimes people believe things that are wrong. I told them we would keep praying together. I told them that love does not vanish because someone lies. One afternoon, Raphael sat me down and said, in a voice that had worked too long, "We need to decide what to do if she refuses help." He looked at me as if he needed a plan, not a sermon. I found myself answering with the suit of both faith and strategy one had been stitching: community, evidence, and firmness. We would not be hasty. We would not be cruel. We would be measured. There were small daily tests, an invitation to a workshop he would not tell us the location of, a message deleted when I entered a room, a tear wiped away too quickly. Each small omission accumulated into a pattern I could no longer ignore. The night that pattern became tangible was not violent. It was plain. Veronica returned home later than she had said she would. Her hands trembled. She avoided my eyes. She locked the bedroom door and cried in a way that was ragged and private. I sat in the doorway and prayed softly, not to interrupt but to be near. She called the woman who had guided her and spoke in a voice that slid across the receiver like oil. "Everything is under control," she said, and then, to the other, "Do not worry about my mother." Her voice hardened into the voice I had heard before. It was then I understood with a clarity that felt like light through glass. Someone was coaching her not to trust us. The trust had been replaced with fear that we would take something from her: freedom, money, the new identity she had been offered. I walked away and returned with a small sheet of paper. On it I wrote one line: "You are loved and not alone." I slid it under her door. I did not expect immediate gratitude. I expected the slow work of a heart remembering its home. That night the house felt smaller and larger at once. The fight was still mostly invisible. But now I had proof. Now there was evidence that the shadow walking in our rooms had human hands. The question that rose was heavy and sharp: who was the hand that guided those shadows? I would not rush to name the person. I would watch. I would gather. I would prepare. The suspicion had turned from a faint whisper to a steady drumbeat in my chest. I felt the shape of the next days like a horizon. I had to act, but I had to act with love and with authority. The discovery of the box had closed a circle. It had given me a place from which to move. The next morning I would begin to map the relationships, to call those who had been touched, to ask questions that needed answers. A small cloth doll lay folded like a confession. Threads of hair, my hair, woven into its head. My face had been struck out of printed photos and words had been written in careful ink. The handwriting at the bottom of the page made my stomach turn. A name, Luciana Romano. The letters looked like the signature of a promise that always breaks. I had seen her comments online, the gentle affirmations, the promises of breaking generational chains. My hands did not tremble when I lifted the paper. But my heart became a drum in my ribs. I read aloud the phrase that made everything align: remove maternal influence. That sentence was a key turned in a lock I'd feared but could not yet name. The room felt smaller after that. The air had density, as if a curtain had been drawn between me and the light. I moved toward Veronica the way one approaches someone asleep in sick bed. "Who is she to you?" I asked. "What does she ask? What does she promise?" The questions were clinical and tender at once. Her shoulders rose, an involuntary shrug of someone taught to hide truth in breath. "She sees what you can't," Veronica said. "She sees chains. She shows me how to break them." There it was, the claim of liberation used as a lever. Liberation that demanded my removal. I thought of every hand I'd held in prayer over the years. I thought of names whispered in the night and of bread shared at a kitchen table. Was I to be traded for a promise? Her tone changed then, sharpened by accusation. "Your prayers bind," she said. "They make me small. They stop me from becoming." The line was a serpent, sleek and deliberate. I felt a coldness between us like a draft under a door. It moved along the floorboards and found me in the ribs. I recognized the shape of it because I'd prayed through similar drafts before. When I named Luciana aloud, something in Veronica's face shifted. A small vacancy opened, like the moment right after a child lets go of a balloon. "I told you not to meddle," she said. "You will make things worse." I could see fear under the armor of her anger. At once, the human and the force that used her were both visible. The separation had to be precise in my heart. My daughter was not the same as what clung to her. This is the line I drew then, quietly and with prayer. Person and presence are not the same. You love the person. You battle the presence. I stepped closer and I said her name. "Veronica," I said, the syllables an anchor. "Look at me." For a breath, her eyes found mine and I saw the child I had taught to say grace. "Has my prayer ever harmed you?" I asked. The question landed like a pebble in still water. There was a ripple of recognition and then a wall. She reached into her pocket and produced a pendant. It was a small black stone on a frayed cord. She held it as if it were oxygen. "Luciana says this protects me," she said. "You will not understand." When she raised it, the metal catch clicked quietly and the room seemed to inhale. I felt, with a clarity that surprised me, that this stone was a channel. "That stone is not protection," I told her. "It is a tether." I could feel the attention in the room shift, as if something that had been leaning in to listen now hissed. The words hit some unseen listener and it retreated for a moment. "Why is my money gone?" I asked, and the question was practical and necessary. Raphael had already shown me the statements. Small sums, regular, inexplicable. Payments labeled in terms that felt invented to cover greed. 7,000 in 3 months is not a spiritual investment. It is an extraction. Her face paled, but she answered like a soldier. "It was for sessions," she said. "For cleansing. For expansion." The vocabulary was spiritualized commerce. She tried to turn the finger back on me. You always used guilt, she said. You always did. Old frictions surfaced like bruises, another weapon folded into the larger one. I placed the papers on the table and the business of proof became as plain as plateware. The room felt like a courtroom and my testimony was the evidence of a long con. Her hands shook when she saw the figures. Doubt walked in then, a timid thing at first, then braver. The presence that had used her recoiled. I heard it as an absence more than a voice. She told me you'd manipulate me with guilt, Veronica whispered. She said you would not understand the new ways. The lies were tidy, designed to sever without scandal. I reached for her hand and she flinched. Her skin was warm and yet there was resistance beneath her bones. I prayed a line silently, a scripture that steadied me because words in the heart are armor. You're not alone, I said. I will not shame you. I will stand with you. The room held its breath with me. Outside, the lemon tree released a small sigh of leaves and the kettle in my kitchen clicked as it cooled down. There are moments when revelation is a bright and hard thing. This was one of them. The enemy had a face and a name and a ledger. But the revelation of evil is also a call to mercy. I felt my heart stretch toward both truth and tenderness. It is possible to hate the thing and love the person. The presence snarled then, a low pressure that made my nails ache. Veronica's words became jagged and defensive. The pendant, momentarily forgotten, lay at my feet like a small black stone of accusation. I did not shout. I did not break. I chose instead the posture of invitation. I would not lash out, I would lead back. Outside the window the afternoon turned to a cold blue. The house seemed to take on the color of waiting. I could taste the prayer on my tongue like salt. I placed the doll and the papers in a box and closed the lid as if sealing a wound. I did not exult. There was no triumph in my hands, only a sober resolve. The revelation had given me the outline of a plan. That plan would have softness and firmness. It would need allies and evidence and the steady cadence of prayer. It would require me to walk with both my daughter and the God who had kept my feet. The night folded over us like a cloak. Veronica left shortly after. The pendant returned to her neck with the same careful ritual as always. I watched her go, and in the watching I felt both sorrow and resolve. I knelt at my prayer bench that night in a way that was more like steadying myself than begging. I prayed for truth to find her like water. I prayed that the deception would unthread and that we could gather what was left. Where there is revelation, there must also be discernment. I would need both a map and a compass. My compass was prayer. My map would be evidence and community. Some doors require more than a knock. The revelation had opened one such door. Now I had to decide how to walk through it without being consumed by what waited on the other side. The last sound I heard before sleep was the neighbor's radio low, playing an old hymn. It was a thin thread of ordinary life. I clung to it like a raft. The cliff of action loomed. I could smell the work that would come. I would not rush, but I would not delay. Something else had been named tonight. The enemy was not anonymous. And that naming changed everything. The question now was not whether there was evil in our midst. It was how to meet it without losing the soul caught in its grasp. I rose then, and I made plans with a prayer in my mouth. The house cooled around me in the early hours. I kept my Bible open by the lamp, a small triangle of light against the dark. Pages marked with long-prayed favorites were comforting like old fabric. Sleep refused me. My body wanted rest, but my spirit had been woken by an alarm I could not silence. Every creak of the floor felt like an accent on an unanswered question. I walked from room to room, each slow step a prayer in motion. I moved like someone tending a fragile flame. I checked the door, I knocked, and the sound was small but necessary. Raphael opened the door with eyes wide and red. He led me up the stairs in silence. Outside their bedroom the air was colder. The hallway light buzzed like an insect around a lamp. Miguel and Sarah sat on the bench, small bodies pressing into each other. "Abuela," Miguel said, her voice keeps changing. It was the sort of observation children make when they touch the edge of grown things. I told them to go to their rooms and watch cartoons and made a promise to myself to keep them shielded. I moved inside the room alone. The bed was a small center in a wide ocean of incense smoke. Veronica lay curled, hands pressed to her stomach as if holding something that could not be spoken. She looked up when I entered. For a moment there was a human recognition in her eyes and then it slid away. "It's worse when you're here," she said. "It hurts when you pray." The claim was one I had heard before, robed in new language. "That's a lie fed to you," I said, and my voice was both tender and firm. "The enemy twists truth until it poisons the beloved." She cried out then, a sound that had the shape of being pulled. At times her words were hers, private and raw. At times they were clipped and unfamiliar, like someone reading from a script behind her teeth. I sat by her bed and simply kept my presence. Sometimes prayer is not a flood but a slow, steady leak of light. I prayed quiet lines, psalms that have carried me through storms. The night grew heavy. I whispered scripture like a lullaby and watched for any sign that the pressure in the room changed. The pendant pulsed with a dull sheen when the air shivered. At dawn Veronica fell into an exhausted sleep that was not rest but release. She slept hard for hours, as if she had been unknotted. I watched her breathing slow and felt a small, cautious hope. Yet hope does not declare victory. There are seasons of fragile truce. The enemy sometimes withdraws to wound later. I stayed until the house blinked awake. I drank coffee that tasted like a prayer and read a psalm aloud between sips. The words steadied me as much as they claimed to steady the broken. That afternoon I called the neighbors who had mentioned similar things. Their voices were relieved and small. They gave me names and brief confessions of how Luciana, or Claudia, as she'd later be known, had slid into their lives. There were patterns. The charm of new language that sounded wise. The suggestion of family curses. The small, precise extractions of cash. The stories overlapped like a net. When people come forward, truth becomes audible in a way it was not before. A pattern is a voice. It tells a story that individual incidents cannot. Raphael and I compared notes and felt the slow pothole of anger widen into a roadway of decision. We could not shame Veronica into insight. That would only deepen the wound. We had to invite her into a choice that felt her own. That evening a small light arrived in the form of a knock. Father Dominic stood at our door with a small vial of blessed oil and a face marked by the kind of gravity that comes from years of prayer. He had waited, he said, for the right moment to act. "We must be wise," he told me once, his hand brushed mine. "We must also be patient. This is not a spectacle, it is pastoral." His words were both a balm and a map. He knew that spiritual battles are rarely thunderous, they are often surgical. We set a watch plan. One person would stay with the children. One person would be with Veronica if she agreed. We lined up Dr. Marquez as a listening ear. We made sure each step had both spiritual and psychological care. That night I slept in short breaths. I kept a candle lit by the bedroom door as if its wick could stand as a sentinel. I felt a gravity gather inside me that was both sorrow and determination. In the quiet hours I remembered my own losses and how each had sharpened my faith. Loss had taught me to hold lightly and to anchor deeply. This felt like another refining. Lines of prayer repeated themselves in my mind like a chorus. I found myself saying them aloud in different rhythms so that they would hold if my voice shook. Prayed in silence, but not afraid. I was wounded, but not broken. I have learned over the years that authority is more felt than flaunted. It is a steady stance, a refusal to be hurried by fear. My authority would be maternal and spiritual woven together. The night closed with a thin thread of calm. But calm is not the same as resolution. Something needed to be done, and the doing would require courage and tact. When I stepped into the kitchen to make coffee for the morning, the lemon tree outside sighed against the window. It felt like a small sign, a green promise that seasons turn. I wrote down the steps we would take, and then I prayed over each one. The dark had been long and real. Pain had been present and true. But pain does not have the last word when prayer is matched with wisdom. I packed a small bag of necessities for Veronica: tea, a blanket, a little journal. Small things, human things, gestures of care that declare, without words, you still belong. I slipped the bag at the foot of her bed like a quiet invitation. The cliff edge of decision was near. I could feel the hinge of action forming beneath my feet. The first move would be gentle and resolute. I turned the page on my Bible and found a verse that felt like an assignment. The weapons of our warfare are not carnal. The words steadied my hands. I breathed, and in that breath I heard an answer prepare itself. Preparation feels like prayer made visible. I scrubbed the house in the morning light until familiar smells returned. The scent of lemon and coffee began to reclaim rooms that had hummed with incense. I played worship quietly in the corners. Music moves the air in a way words sometimes cannot. It has the power to reorder a room's memory. I spoke to Dr. Marquez about gentle exposures and deprogramming. She advised pacing, non-shaming language, and the presence of witnesses. Her counsel was practical and kind. Father Dominic came to anoint thresholds and to pray short, steady prayers. He moved through the house like someone setting posts in a field. His voice was low and without flourish. "We are not performing a theater," he said softly. "We are making space for truth." That line anchored me the way a rope anchors a climber. Truth needs room to breathe. I called the neighbors who had shared their stories. They came with testimonies and a calm readiness. Community, I realized, is the opposite of the isolation Luciana had sold. Raphael arranged documentation into a folder, neat and unembellished. Statements, messages, receipts, photographs. The ledger of small injuries. Evidence is a kind of armor when love would otherwise be gaslight. Miguel showed me another small object he had found in the shed. It was a tin box wrapped in cloth. Inside, more talismans and a list of rituals with names and dates. Each discovery was a step in a breadcrumb trail. The trail led to a person who had learned to speak fear like melody. She had translated loneliness into opportunity. On the second morning of preparation, I received a small, sharp insight during prayer. I had been asking for a strategy, and a simple image came, a lamp set in the middle of the room that would not be moved. The image was a command to make the ordinary visible. I wrote it down. Then I arranged the dining table with photographs across its center, ordinary family images, years of presence. They were not evidence for accusation, they were anchors of belonging. I anointed the doorframes with the blessed oil Father Dominic had given me. The oil smelled faintly of rosemary and old paper. As I drew my thumb along the lintel, I whispered a blessing over each door. We rehearsed what we would say. Words had to be gentle but firm. Accusations would not loosen a spirit bound, invitations to truth would. I called Raphael, and it was the familiar dance of denial and deflection. How much did she charge for clearings? I asked. The number on the statement made her go white. She touched the pendant, and for a moment she seemed to shrink around it. When I asked her to remove the stone from her neck, she hesitated, like someone considering whether to let go of a rope mid-climb. Fear is a masterful liar. But fear is also mortal when faced with calm. I knelt beside her chair and put my hands on her shoulders like an anchor. Nothing will happen except your first step toward freedom, I said. The words were both prayer and promise. Her fingers fumbled at the clasp and the pendant slid free. She gasped as if taking a first breath after a long submersion. For a beat the room was a held note. I placed the pendant into a small silver box I had prepared. It looked ordinary and small in my hands, but inside it held all the hush and harm that had been cloaked as protection. I closed the lid with the deliberate motion of someone finishing a long stitch. Veronica wept then, not in the wildness of a storm but in the slow, ragged way of someone who finally admits they were deceived. I said terrible things to you, she sobbed. I believed it. Her words were both apology and the pulling of a thorn. We did not shout or demand a spectacle of confession. We offered presence, therapy, and a fixed point of family. That is how a lamp is kept in the center, not as a weapon, but as a witness. Later that night we gathered in my living room. Father Dominic read prayers that felt like netting. Each verse was a stitch that bound light into the room. Miguel stood up mid-circle and asked if we could pray together. To show it's not true, he said. To show it's not a curse. Children speak the simplest truths with the most devastating clarity. Veronica knelt in the circle and asked for my blessing. Her hands trembled, and when I laid mine on her head I felt the trembling begin to still. Blessing is not magic, it is the return of naming. Light does not always break with trumpets. Often it comes in the small, steady exhale of people who refuse to keep secrets. That night our exhale was communal. Afterwards we ate and laughed, and the sound of ordinary life reclaimed the space as if it had been waiting for permission. Veronica watched me across the table and mouthed the words without sound, "Thank you." They were two small words that carried mountains. She slept like someone who has been allowed to rest at last. But rest was not the end of the story. Healing would be a slow and disciplined thing. In the mornings she met with Dr. Marquez, and with small steps she began to untangle belief from manipulation. She learned to name the subtle techniques used on her, and in naming there was an inevitable loosening. Truth has a way of dissolving false stitches. Luciana's name circulated then among others who had been taken and then freed. The pattern made it easier for authorities to see. There were calls and paperwork and small legal steps taken. We disposed of the ritual items with the guidance of Father Dominic. There was no theater in the burning, only intentional, reverent closure. We spoke words of boundary and called in holiness to fill the spaces left behind. Veronica rebuilt something inside her that did not make her brittle. She did not go back to the person she had been. She returned, altered but present, like a tree that had weathered a storm and grown a new ring. Forgiveness came, not as a single act, but as a practice. I forgave the person who had been used as a vessel, and I called out the force that had used her. The two things sit differently in the heart. We reformed our habits. I kept a notebook where she could write what she felt before she voiced it. We set appointments with Dr. Marquez and agreed on boundaries with friends. As the weeks passed, the family table regained its rhythms. Laughter returned. Old prayers were not mocked but remembered. My journal filled again with the small notations of thanks. Yet something in me was quieter now. There is a line love does not cross. There are protections we owe ourselves and those we love. The pendant remained sealed in the silver box. It was evidence and warning. We kept it not as a trophy but as a reminder. I learned then a lesson I had not known I needed. The work of prayer is both shelter and sword. Prayer had protected us in ways we could not always see. Months later, Veronica slipped a new journal across the table to me. On the cover she had written with a steady hand, "Your prayers were always my protection." The words were simple and true like bread. We stood in a light that had been earned by perseverance. Darkness had been present and real. But darkness will not keep its seat when a family sits together in truth. We still talk about that season with a quiet reverence. Not as a story of triumph over someone, but as a testimony to what community does when it refuses to let a loved one be consumed. I continue to pray, not to claim power but to hold what is true. The last thing I will tell you is this: prayer was not punishment in our home. It was the bridge that brought a daughter home. And sometimes the longest prayers are the ones that hold steady while the world changes. I keep the silver box hidden in a drawer and I keep a lamp on the table at night. Where there was shadow, we set a light. The light is simple and it is enough for now. The story is not finished. Some questions remain. But the worst of the darkness has gone. Where there is light, new questions come. How do we guard this light? How do we teach our children to see? Those are the conversations I have now, in the quiet of evening, with a cup of coffee and a Bible open to a psalm. The battle was not only external. It reshaped us from within. I keep praying. Not because prayer is a simple cure but because it is a faithful work. I pray in silence, but I do not fear. The lamp remains in the middle of the room. And I watch who comes to the table. They came in like weather, quiet at first, then sudden in a way that unsettled the room. Raphael's shoulders carried the tiredness of a man who had watched his wife unravel for weeks. Miguel's small hand found mine, and the touch was steady enough to keep me anchored. Veronica stood at the threshold, a silhouette of hurt and defense. Her pendant caught the kitchen light and threw a black coin of shadow across the floor. She avoided my eyes the way someone avoids a mirror after a storm. I moved with the ordinary rituals that had kept our home together for decades. Plates were set. A pot was lifted. The scent of chilaquiles filled the air like a promise. Normal things reposition the spirit. They are tiny lighthouses on dangerous coasts. She hovered while I called the children. They ran in and filled the space with noise, with ease, with the kind of distraction that washes away dread for a while. Raphael laid out his tired smile and sat without speaking. His hands were folded like a small, private prayer. "Help me with the table?" I asked, keeping my voice light. She complied, but there was distance in the way she moved, as if we were two people learning the choreography of civility. Her fingers brushed the family photos I had placed down the center of the table, and some old thing in her face softened for a breath. The photographs were anchors. They were not evidence to accuse, but memory to call. They showed us as we had been ordinary, human, tethered. I let the small domestic acts do their work. I asked about Miguel's school project. I teased Sarah about the cartoon she loved. Each ordinary question was a pebble dropped into still water, waiting for a ripple. Dinner arrived like a gentle tide. We ate with an intentional calm, neither pressing nor pleading. Veronica's fork clicked against her plate, quick and sharp, as if it sliced more than food. After dessert, with the children corralled in another room, I placed the folder on the table. It made a soft sound, a hinge opening into the truth. The room exhaled and held its breath. "Who is Luciana Romano?" I asked, in the voice that had said prayers over births and bedsides. Her face pinched. She answered with the rehearsed words the woman had taught her. Yet the tautness in her jaw betrayed a thread of doubt. I opened the folder slowly, like someone. "If I leave it with you, will something bad happen?" she whispered. Her voice trembled between superstition and shame. "Nothing bad will happen except your first step toward freedom," I answered. I spoke with a steadiness that comes from long practice. I knelt beside her chair and did what mothers do when a child is hurting. I became a refuge. Her hands fumbled the clasp. The pendant came away like the end of a long, held breath. She inhaled with a sound like a small surrender. It landed in my palm heavier than metal. In that weight I felt the threads of manipulation. I placed it in the silver box I'd prepared. I shut the lid with a motion measured and final. The box did not sparkle. It simply contained. She broke then, not loudly, but with a ragged sound full of apologies. "I said terrible things," she admitted. "I believed her when she said your prayers were poison." Words that once cut like knives now fell like rain on soft soil. They soaked in and opened things that had been closed. I held her as she cried. A mother's arms are rows of shelter. I have used them before when storms came. This was a different kind of storm, but shelter is shelter. Raphael joined us. His presence was steady and unornamented. He did not demand answers from her. He simply stood with us in the aftermath. Forgiveness was not announced in a flourish. It arrived as a slow, honest realignment. We did not triumph in spectacle. There was no dramatic vanishing, no theatrical blast. There was just a woman who had been deceived, now naming the deceit. The presence that had thrived on secrecy recoiled at being named. You could feel the atmosphere adjust, like pressure dropping before rain. It was not that the danger was gone, it was that the veil had been pulled aside. We spent the rest of the evening in small, ordinary acts. Father Dominic arrived and sat with us, his prayer simple and steady, fingers anointing doors with oil that smelled of rosemary and memory. He spoke of boundaries and of calling things to the light. His voice held the cadence of someone who had watched many wounds be tended. "Make space for truth," he whispered to me later. "But do not make a theater of it." Those words were precisely what I needed, firm and pastoral. The confrontation had been surgical. It had to be gentle enough to let truth in. That night Veronica slept as if she had been untied. Her breath slowed into the long rhythm of rest. I sat by the lamp and read a psalm aloud, the words like mortar setting a small house. When I think back to that table, I see the way light laid itself across the photos. I remember Miguel's innocent comment as he played in the other room, "Abuela, when Mom said your prayers were a curse, can we all pray to show it's not true?" Children know truth in ways we often forget. They point to it like a compass. We did not start a crusade against every stray thought that might come to her in the future. We started a ministry of presence. We offered therapy, accountability, community. The pendant went into a locked drawer. The ledger of harm was documented. The neighbors who had been quietly harmed found a voice. It is a strange thing to love someone through their deception. You do not excuse the harm. You separate the person from the force that used them. You teach them again how to anchor in truth. That night I slept a little easier. But the watch did not end. Vigil remains. Prayer continued, steady as a heartbeat. There was a quiet confidence in me now. The enemy had been named. The next steps were mercy and repair. Yet there was also an ache that would not leave. Trust, once bent, takes time to straighten. And the person who had been used to wound needed looking after with both compassion and guardedness. Before I went to bed I placed the family journal on the table. I wrote a few lines. We choose truth. We choose us. In the margin, a small prayer: guard this place with steadfastness. Where there is light, the dark cannot keep its hold. The days after the confrontation moved like hands on a slow clock. There was a rhythm of small repairs and cautious conversations. Every ordinary task felt like a stitch in the mending. Veronica slept like someone recovering from an operation of the soul. When she woke, her eyes had a clarity that frightened and relieved me. We began with small things: tea on the back porch, photographs spread between us like a river to cross. She wanted to understand with the steadiness of someone who had been betrayed by what she thought was wise. How did I not see it? She asked, and the question was less about shame than about hunger for truth. We traced the arc of Luciana's influence in the ledger on the table. There is a pattern to deception. First the flattery, then the special knowledge, then the insistence that only the teacher understands the path. People who prey on the vulnerable are patient and industrious. They build dependence the way ivy creeps up a wall's small tendrils until the whole structure is covered. Raphael filed a police report. It was a bureaucratic act but also a declaration: we would not be quietly taken. Other families came forward. Their stories overlapped with ours like maps showing the same river. In the mornings Veronica met with Dr. Marquez. Her sessions were a digging of roots, patient and relentless. There she began to name the techniques Luciana had used: gaslighting, financial extraction, social isolation dressed in spiritual language. We set boundaries with tenderness. I asked my other children to limit conversations about the case in front of the grandchildren. Grace, I insisted, needs containment. Truth must not become an instrument of public shaming. Forgive, but do not forget the lesson, I told them one evening. Forgiveness is an act of liberation, not of naivete. Boundaries are not cold, they are a way to love wisely. Father Dominic helped us dispose of the ritual items with reverence. We did not seek spectacle. We burned what needed burning, prayed over what needed blessing, and kept the rest under lock. There was no triumph in the ashes, only a careful, ritual closing. Veronica's healing was not linear. There were days she laughed and days when the shadow returned at unexpected times. We marked the small victories like mileposts: a night without nightmares, a week of therapy, a smile that reached her eyes. Community held us in ways that surprised me. Neighbors brought casseroles and stories. They told us of similar warnings they had once ignored. The web was wider than I thought. It comforted and it alarmed. We created a watch plan. Someone would be present with the children at night. Someone would check in with Veronica by phone. The plan was practical and tender, an architecture of love. Sometimes when I sat quietly I replayed the moments before the revelation. I questioned my own blindness. Had I been too trusting? Too slow to act? Then I would open my Bible and read lines I had known since childhood, and peace would settle over the bubbling question. Prayer took on a new shape. It was no longer a whispered routine. It became a work of discernment and naming. I would pray aloud in the house so the sound itself would testify to truth. Pray in the open, Father Dominic advised. Let your words be a lamp. And so I did. I read psalms in the kitchen while washing dishes. I sang hallelujahs while sweeping floors. Sound changes a room as light does. It moves spirits in ways we do not always see. Veronica asked for my blessing in a moment that felt like a hinge. We gathered in the living room with the children and Raphael. Father Dominic led a simple service. We formed a circle, an ordinary miracle of hands. Miguel's voice was small and fierce. Abuela, can we say that my mom's prayers are not a curse? He asked. Children are blunt when the language of the adult world gets tangled. Their words cut back to the marrow. Veronica knelt. She asked for my blessing with tears and with a humility that made the room feel holy. When I placed my hands on her head, I felt a releasing. Not a cinematic explosion, but on the first page she had written, "Your prayers were always my protection, never my prison." Those words were a balm and a testimony. They were not a final verdict, just a way station on a long road. But they told me that the inner wiring was shifting. We spent evenings discussing how to guard against such predators in the future. We talked to the children about boundaries and about the difference between healthy guidance and control disguised as spirituality. We invited Dr. Marquez to speak with our extended family and with neighborhood groups. Community education is a form of prevention. Predators like Claudia feed on isolation. They cannot maintain their web where people are informed and connected. We made sure the net of support would be harder to walk into. As the weeks layered into months, Veronica's posture shifted. She reclaimed small pleasures without worrying about spiritual interference. She allowed herself to receive prayer without flinching. There were still tremors. Occasionally a dream would wake her, a phrase would drop into her mind. We sat with those tremors, naming them and praying them into the light. Healing tolerates a slow cadence. I also learned to keep my own watch. I had been a mother and a minister in quiet ways for decades. This season taught me humility and fierce protectiveness in equal measure. We still visited Father Dominic and continued sessions with Dr. Marquez. We did not rush the story. We lived it, day by day. I watched my daughter reweave herself into the fabric of family with stitches both gauzy and taut. One evening, we sat at the table and read scripture together without fanfare. The children traced their fingers along the verses. The words sat in the room like a new furniture piece, familiar and sturdy. "Where there is light, the dark cannot keep its hold," I said aloud, and the room echoed the truth. Forgiveness arrived as practice. It was a daily action, sometimes a breath, sometimes a choice to speak kindly. That practice does not erase accountability. It does not return stolen money. It rebuilds souls. Claudia's name circulated among authorities and among families. There was a sense of justice that moved in slow increments. It was not vengeance. It was the world realigning. When someone had been preyed upon, the exposure of the method is itself a form of deliverance. Veronica began to write in that notebook with a steadier hand. She wrote prayers, observations, lists of things she feared and things she wanted to reclaim. The act of writing became a catechism of recovery. Sometimes at night, I would hold the phone and call Father Dominic just to pray for an extra 5 minutes. He prayed in a low voice that seemed to settle like ointment. Aging brings trusting rhythms and the wisdom to ask for help. The silver box remained closed. When the temptation to make it a spectacle crossed my mind, I resisted. Some relics are for memory, not for show. A month after the confrontation, I found a small white card under my Bible. On it, in a child's uneven handwriting, "Abuela, thank you for holding our table." I cried then, quietly and without fanfare. The table had been held. The family had been rescued from slow strangulation. We were not naive about the future. There would be tests, temptations, and moments when doubt tries to return. But we had learned to name the tactics, to speak the truth, and to keep light where shadows had once been welcome. One night, as I closed the curtains, I whispered a prayer, not for armor that isolates, but for wisdom that binds us to one another. The answer felt small and intimate: keep the lamp, watch who comes to the table. The liberation had not been a single dramatic event. It had been a communal act: prayer, confrontation, therapy, and slow restoration. It was holy work done in the ordinary hours. We had reclaimed one life, and in doing so, we had fortified the household. I had learned a new kind of vigilance, one that blends gentleness with boundary, mercy with truth. The lemon tree outside the window seemed to lean toward the sun. It was a small sign that seasons change. Where there is light, we will teach our children to recognize it. Months have settled like soft pages. The immediate fear has passed. The household breathes with a steadier rhythm. But the memory of those nights is not gone, it is a teacher. Veronica brings her journal to the table now. She writes morning prayers and lists small gratitudes. Sometimes she reads aloud a line that once seemed impossible: "Your prayers were always my protection, never my prison." We keep the silver box hidden. It is not a trophy, but a reminder. We do not glorify the harm, we learn from it. There is humility in our song now. We have seen how clever darkness can be when it masquerades as illumination. We have learned how easy it is for a person in pain to mistake someone's control for compassion. Truth, I have come to believe, is an act as much as it is a word. It demands repetition. It demands that we set small lamps in the middle of our rooms and keep them burning. It asks us to speak plainly, to bind our children in love that carries boundaries. I still wake at odd hours and pray. My Bible sits open by the lamp, its pages marked and worn. Prayer remains my work and my refuge. People will ask, as they always do, whether I am angry. I am not angry in a way that consumes me. I am resolute. There is a tenderness reserved for my daughter and a firmness toward the force that used her. We invited others to the table to teach them how to guard their households. We told our story with care, not to brand someone as forever broken, but to show the shape of deception. Community against isolation is a preventative. Forgiveness has its place. It is not a single act but a habit. We forgive the person who was used because holding her shame would have been another theft. We confront the force that manipulated without making the person into the enemy. If you are watching and your home feels like it is tilting, notice the small things. A sudden insistence that only one person can help. A pattern of fees disguised as urgent care. A whisper that your loved ones are the problem, not the people who prey on your pain. Make space for truth. Keep a lamp in the center of your home. Invite community. Call a trusted counselor and a pastor. Do the practical work of documentation. The smallest acts of vigilance are often the most protective. I learned another thing that surprised me: children are seers in their bluntness. Miguel said what we needed when he asked to pray with us. Do not underestimate the voice of a child in the middle of hard things. The battle we faced was not about triumphing over a person. It was about reclaiming a soul and restoring a household to sight. We fought with prayer and with paperwork. We fought with patience and with presence. My daughter sits next to me now, her handwriting steady in a new journal. When she reaches for my hand across the table, I give it without question. That touch is the answer to many fears. There is still a question that hums in my mind, a small, persistent asking for all of us: how do we teach our children to see without scaring them? It is not a question with a single answer. It is the work of a lifetime. If this story meets you in a season of worry, let it be an encouragement. Light does not always break with trumpets. Often it is the patient tending of ordinary things. Pray. Speak. Gather. Protect. And if you found this helpful, please consider subscribing and sharing your town below. Tell me where you are praying from. Tell me if you have seen shadows in your own doorway. We are a community of lamps, together we make a brighter room. In the quiet of evening I close my Bible and whisper the same line I have said for years: the work of prayer is steady, not spectacular. I keep a lamp on the table at night. And I watch who comes to the table.